Hello, this is Aaron Claiborne with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery. And today I have Shane with me to share his experience with stigma. How you doing, Shane?
Hello, good, thank you.
Good, it's nice to have you here. Okay, so now I'd like to ask you, how does stigma harm people seeking or in recovery?
I would say from uh, recent experience in active addiction, as well as my role as a recovery coach at my local recovery center in La Crosse, it's been interesting to observe that thought from a few different perspectives in terms of like my own stigma in active addiction, as well as stigma that I've observed in like maybe the recovery community, local recovery community, its own stigma, as well as like outside observation of that stigma, right? So, how I feel where my perception has been had changed or maybe become more current with recovery language, with the training that I've had as a recovery coach, I guess is kind of where my perspective is based now, obviously. And it's been interesting seeing that transition uh, early on in my own active addiction. Um, there were times where I might have been even myself comfortable with using a term with something like, donkey, I guess, is one of the more heavier ones that you might hear from people that might not be more aware of the broader scope of, what addiction is and stuff like that. Obviously, it's a very dated concept, but so from earlier on with my own experience with language like that, coming into where I'm at in recovery now, um, there have been times that I might have ran into people that now know me as a recovery coach in the community, as opposed to seeing me in active addiction on the streets kind of thing, where they might, that might be uh, uh, where their language is at, is maybe using terminology similar to that. And I usually just see that as an experience to show that when you're using more aggressive language like that, it's kind of shutting people down from maybe wanting to grow out of where they're at with that. So, it's just really kind of a negative way to look at things. So when you go into things like trying to share your perspective on where people are at with things, that usually kind of shuts off communication, makes people feel bad about themselves. And their people are obviously therefore less likely to seek help and stuff like that because they're in this spiral shame kind of thing, or famous spiral of shame. So when you're using language that's more positive and opening, proactive, it takes that shame away from it. So, and people are obviously a lot more open to growing and healing and recovery. So that's been my observation and experience from literally kind of all ends of the spectrum on that, from being someone who might have been less educated
Mhm.
with the choice of language, going into a heavier term like experience of my own personal active addiction, and then coming out like post treatment into training as a recovery coach. So
Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
yeah,
that transition from um, using that stigmatizing language to your own personal recovery, then reflecting on, um, I would say what I'm hearing from you is almost a level of acceptance when you hear those, derogatory terms.
derogatory.
And after you're educated and you are, maintain some sobriety, then you hear it again. It's like it makes you reflect back on how it made you feel. And then in turn, you're
Yeah,
thinking about how you can, this person using a stigmatizing language can affect someone else's growth. I like to hear
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um, Now, can you tell me how the stigma against people perpetuate substance use disorder? I heard you speak a little bit on that in the previous question, but can you elaborate a little bit more on that, please?
Certainly. So kind of what I think of as an example with that was with my own personal upbringing. I was a single child raised by an only parent who had unaddressed mental health and addiction issues that I didn't necessarily gain perspective on until like my 20s into my 30s. And I know a lot of reasons on why my mother didn't seek help was because of stigma around addiction and mental health issues. As it was what it was in the past, I think. It maybe is to some degree still, but even more so with that was definitely a big barrier into her maybe not seeking her own treatment for mental health issues. It just definitely, shaped the reality of what she thought was maybe happening and just didn't necessarily see a hope or a way out or those kinds of things. And that perception really just compounded in on itself in terms of just not seeing hope. And I kind of watched that happen from my 20s into my 30s and whatnot. And unfortunately, it got to the point where she just didn't really see a way out and lost the battle with mental health issues and addiction. So that's a large part of why I saw myself going down a similar path in terms of self-destruction. And I'm very thankful to have the, I guess, experience from different forms of treatment and mental health and stuff like that to help shape my perception of what things, what options there are nowadays, these days currently with mental health and addiction treatment. So, um, so I see a hope where, it's the stigma can definitely put a barrier to that with some people. So.
Most definitely. Well, I want to say congratulations on all your progress and your accomplishments and achievements. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers before we end in our last 30 seconds or so?
Early on in my recovery, it seemed with some outpatient that I had participated in, um, I it seemed to me that if I needed some perception on any sort of like what I thought the solution to active addiction is, I heard the idea of, addiction is isolation and being alone.
Yeah.
Recovery and those kinds of things is connection with people. So based off that idea, the kind of language that you choose to use when you're trying to connect with people, you're either going to leave it more open-ended for growth or you're going to use, uh, different preconceptions on things where it's just going to shut off and connect you less from people, I guess. So yeah, just try and get out there and connect with people. And, it seems to be some sort of solution with active addiction, I feel. So.
Yeah, that is a great one of the best solutions to uh, getting into recovery and maintain and have those support systems around you.
Yeah.
Shane, I want to thank you for being here. I love your perspective on stigma. Um, I'm sure our viewers will enjoy it. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, please check back uh, for other stigma interviews on Wisconsin Voice for Recovery at Facebook.com. All right, until next time.